Usually when we talk about massive real estate deals on this show, we're unpacking a tech giant buying a new campus or maybe a merger between two media conglomerates.
Right, something corporate.
But
Like that.
today, we are talking about a real estate deal that feels like it fell out of a wormhole from the 19th century.
It really does. It gives off strong Louisiana Purchase vibes, doesn't it? Or maybe the purchase of Alaska.
Exactly. It feels like something from a time when world leaders sat around a map with a ruler and, I don't know, a glass of brandy and just carved things up. But we aren't in 1867. We are talking about the very modern, very confusing, and headline-shattering proposal by the President of the United States to simply buy Greenland.
It was the notification that woke everyone up, and I think for most people the reaction was just a mix of confusion and, well, memes. It sounded like a joke. But today, we're going to do what we do best. We're going to ignore the Twitter noise and look at the actual mechanics behind this. We're doing a deep dive into the research presented in Sovereign Ice, Greenland's Resources, and the Pursuit of Independence.
And once you stop laughing at the idea of buying a country on Zillow, you realize the source material's actually terrifyingly serious. This isn't a real estate story.
No.
It's a story about the return of great power competition, economic desperation, and a really tough existential question. Can a small nation actually afford to be free?
That is the core question.
Wow.
Because while the purchase offer was sensational, the reasons behind it, they act as a perfect window into how the world works right now.
Yeah.
To talk about geography, we have to talk about rare earth minerals, and we have to talk about, well, the price of dignity.
So let's start with the offer itself. The president proposes buying the island, the media goes wild, but the administration wasn't just throwing darts at a map. Why Greenland, and why now?
It comes down to one word: location. If you look at a standard map, Greenland just looks like that big white blob at the top that distorts the projection.
Yeah, it looks enormous.
But if you look at a globe and you look at it from the perspective of, say, the Pentagon, Greenland is the gatekeeper of the North Atlantic.
This is the GIUK gap thing, right?
Yeah.
I remember reading about that in Cold War thrillers.
Exactly. The Greenland-Iceland-UK gap. It's the naval choke point. If you control Greenland, you control who gets in and out of the Atlantic Ocean.
Okay, but that feels a bit old school.
Well, it's more than just old Cold War tactics. The Arctic is melting, and as the ice recedes, you have new shipping lanes opening up that slash transit times between Asia and Europe.
The Polar Silk Road.
Exactly, the Polar Silk Road that China is aggressively mapping out.
So it's not just about ice anymore. It's about a new ocean forming at the top of the world.
Precisely. And the U.S. looked at that and realized they were behind. The research emphasizes that this purchase offer was driven explicitly by national security concerns regarding China and Russia. Russia is militarizing its Arctic coast at a speed we haven't seen since the Soviet Union. China is calling itself a near-Arctic state, which
It was
is
geographically a stretch.
a huge stretch.
Right. I mean, saying China is near Arctic is like saying I'm a near NBA player because I have season tickets. But they are serious about it.
They are incredibly serious. China has been investing heavily in Greenland's infrastructure, airports, mining surveys, and that freaked Washington out. The U.S. has Thule Air Base in northern Greenland, which is critical for missile warning systems. If China gets a foothold there, economically or physically, it compromises American defense architecture.
So the U.S. logic was, okay, we have a tenant living in the attic who controls our alarm system. The landlord is short on cash, and a rival gang is trying to buy the house.
Let's just buy the house ourselves.
Yeah.
That is a surprisingly accurate analogy. It was a blunt force attempt to lock down strategic security.
But here is where the 19th century mindset hits the 21st century reality. You can't just buy a country because people live there. And the reaction from Greenland was visceral.
It was immediate. The Prime Minister of Greenland didn't mince words. She called it absurd. But other officials went further, calling it offensive.
Offensive is a heavy word in diplomacy.
It is, but think about the history. Greenland is a former colony. They have spent decades fighting for autonomy, clawing back control from Denmark. They are self-governing.
If they have their own parliament.
Their own parliament, their own language, their own culture. To have a foreign leader treat their home like a distressed asset to be acquired, it stripped them of their agency.
It's the not for sale sign.
Yeah.
It's basically saying, We are a people, not a portfolio item.
Exactly. It commodified their existence, and Denmark had to step in, effectively acting as the protective parent, reminding the U.S. that while Greenland is part of the kingdom, it is not Denmark's property to sell.
So a massive diplomatic blunder.
A huge one, because it completely ignored the human element of nationhood.
Okay, so politically, it's a non-starter. The deal is dead. Everyone is offended. But, and this is where the deep dive gets really interesting, the U.S. wasn't wrong about the value, were they?
No.
Because if you strip away the insult, Greenland is sitting on a gold mine.
Well, not just gold. They are sitting on something much more valuable in the modern economy. We are talking about rare earth elements. Neodymium, dysprosium, terbium.
The stuff that makes the modern world go round.
Literally. These are the minerals required for electric vehicle batteries, wind turbines, fighter jets, and, every smartphone in our pockets.
So China currently controls that whole market.
Right, dominates it. Something like 80 to 90% of the market.
And there is Greenland sitting on an untapped pile of this stuff.
Some estimates suggest Greenland holds a quarter of the world's rare earth reserves. It is a geological jackpot.
Okay.
So when the U.S. president says vast resources, he's not guessing. He's looking at geological surveys that show Greenland could break China's chokehold on the tech supply chain.
Okay, so this sets up the central conflict of the whole thing.
Yeah.
You have the Greenlandic people who want independence. They want to be a sovereign nation free from Denmark.
Yeah.
And they are standing on top of the winning lottery ticket that could pay for it.
Yeah.
So why aren't they free yet? Why haven't they cashed the ticket?
Because cashing that ticket is incredibly expensive, and the payout takes a long, long time. This is where we have to pivot from the sexy geopolitics to the cold, hard, boring economics.
Let's look at the bank account.
Yeah.
Because right now, Greenland isn't running on rare earth profits. What is keeping the lights on?
Fish.
Just fish.
Almost entirely. The data shows that fishing accounts for over 90% of Greenland's exports. Prawns and halibut.
90% is a terrifying number for an export economy.
It is.
That's not a specialized economy. That's a mono economy.
It's incredibly fragile. Think about it. You are dependent on global market prices for two specific types of seafood. But even worse, you are dependent on the climate.
Yeah.
As the oceans warm, fish stocks migrate. The prawns might move north. The halibut might disappear. If that happens, 90% of your revenue just evaporates.
And it's not like they have a bustling tech sector or a manufacturing base to fall back on?
No. The largest employer in Greenland is the public sector, the government itself.
Wait, so the government pays the people, but the government's money comes from where?
Denmark. This is the block grant. Every year, Copenhagen sends a transfer of roughly $600 to $700 million directly to the Greenlandic government.
Wow.
When you factor in other services Denmark provides, defense, justice, foreign affairs, the total subsidy is nearly $1 billion annually.
Okay, let's do some quick math. Greenland has a population of what, 56,000 people?
Roughly, yes.
So $1 billion a year for 56,000 people?
Yeah.
That is a massive percentage of their GDP.
Right.
That is a huge safety net.
It's about half of their public budget. It pays for the schools, the hospitals, the airports, the heating in the winter. It is the lifeline.
So this is the reality check. The politicians in Nuuk talk about independence, about breaking away from the old colonial master. But if they cut the cord tomorrow, they lose half their budget. The schools close, the heat goes off.
Exactly. You cannot eat sovereignty. And this is the paradox that the source material keeps circling back to. To be politically independent, they need to be economically independent.
And to be economically independent, they have to replace that Danish billion.
Yep.
And the only way to replace the Danish billion is to dig up the rare earths.
Correct. But here's the problem that most headlines miss. You can't just stick a shovel in the ground and pull out an iPhone battery.
Right.
Building a mining industry from scratch, especially in the Arctic where there are no roads, no power grids, and harsh weather takes massive amounts of capital and time.
We're talking decades, right?
Easily. From the moment you find a deposit to the moment you are selling refined product, it can be 10 to 15 years.
Right.
And it costs billions of dollars upfront to build the infrastructure.
And Greenland does not have billions of dollars.
They don't, so they need an investor.
And who has billions of dollars and a desperate need for resources?
The superpowers. The U.S. and China.
So we are right back to the beginning.
Exactly. To get free of Denmark, Greenland has to invite in the very powers they are trying to protect themselves from.
It's a catch-22. If you want to fire your parents, you have to go work for the shark down the street.
That is the resource curse in a nutshell. We've seen this in Africa, in South America. Small, resource-rich nations think the minerals will make them kings.
But they can't get it out of the ground themselves.
Right. Because they lack the capital, they sign contracts with massive multinational corporations or foreign state-owned enterprises.
And those contracts, I'm guessing they usually favor the guy with the checkbook.
Always. The source warns about the risk of exploitation. And I don't just mean unfair wages. I mean losing control of your own territory.
What do you mean?
Well, if a Chinese state-owned company builds the airport and the mine and the port, and they own the debt, who is really running the country?
It's debt-trap diplomacy.
Precisely. If Greenland pivots to mining to escape Copenhagen's oversight, they might just find themselves answering to Beijing or Washington instead. And unlike Denmark, those superpowers might not be as benevolent about autonomy.
This brings up a really cynical point. The U.S. offer to buy Greenland was offensive because it was so upfront. It was a wholesale purchase.
Yes. Here's a check, give me the keys.
Right. But if Greenland goes independent and has to sign these massive mining deals to survive, aren't they just selling the country retail? You know, piece by piece. A mine here, a port there, a water right there.
That is the provocative thought, isn't it? At least a purchase is transparent. The piecemeal sale of sovereignty through economic dependence is much more insidious. You wake up 20 years later, you have your flag and your anthem, but foreign entities own the ground you're standing on.
It really complicates the offensive nature of the Trump proposal. It was rude, sure, but was it arguably a more honest assessment of Greenland's position than the fantasy of total independence?
It was a brutal assessment of their strategic value, yes. But the Greenlanders argue that management matters. They want the right to make the mistakes. They want the right to negotiate those deals.
So they think they can thread the needle.
They believe that with careful regulation, they can thread the needle, use foreign money to build their infrastructure without selling their soul.
Is there any precedent for that? A small Arctic nation pivoting from fish to riches without getting crushed?
Well, everyone points to Norway. Norway found oil and managed it brilliantly with their sovereign wealth fund.
Right.
But Norway was already an established, functioning state with a diversified economy before the oil. Greenland is starting from a much more precarious position. They have a very small population and a massive brain drain. If you open a high-tech mine, do you even have the local workforce to staff it? Or do you have to import 5,000 workers?
And if you import 5,000 workers into a country of 56,000, you've just changed the demographics of the nation overnight.
Exactly. You risk becoming a minority in your own country in the pursuit of the money to save your country. It is an incredibly tightrope to walk.
You know, when we started this, I thought we were just going to roast the idea of buying an island. But this is actually tragic in a way.
It is.
You have a people who just want to be themselves, but geography and geology won't let them alone.
That is the tragedy of the Arctic in the 21st century. It used to be the periphery, it used to be ignored, now it is center stage. And for the people living there, being ignored was probably a lot more comfortable than being fought over.
So let's wrap this up. What is the takeaway here? We have a U.S. president who sees a fortress. We have China seeing a highway and a gas station.
Right.
We have Denmark seeing a legacy.
And we have Greenlanders seeing a home.
Yeah.
The takeaway is that independence in the modern world isn't just about declaring it, it's about financing it. Greenland is the ultimate test case for whether a small indigenous population can navigate great power competition without being swallowed whole.
It's not just not for sale. It's how do we sell what we have without selling who we are?
That is the defining question, and as the ice melts, that question is going to get louder every single year.
Well, on that cheerful note about the complexities of global capitalism and melting ice caps, thanks for unpacking this with me. It certainly made me look at the map differently.
Anytime. It's a fascinating, if slightly worrying, world out there.
And to our listener, next time you see a headline that looks like a joke, take a second look. It might just be the blueprint for the next 50 years of history. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive.